Today, I will be speaking with Laura Loomer. She is a far-right political personality and avid supporter of Donald Trump, former Republican nominee for Florida's 21st congressional district and former congressional candidate in Florida's 11th district. She's been banned from numerous social media outlets for disinformation and hate speech, as well as being banned from Uber, Lyft, PayPal, GoFundMe, and Venmo. Now, before jumping into this interview, quick caveat. If you're familiar with her history of statements and actions, there are a lot of things I'm sure you'll want to hear me ask her or confront her about. But for the sake of keeping the conversation from going completely off the rails and it being something that fits within the YouTube terms of service, and I do expect some of those questions, if I were to ask them, to lead to far too wild places, I kept the scope of the conversation limited, subject matter limited, and am interviewing her as a figure of the MAGA movement, a representative of the MAGA movement. Y'all know I make an effort to engage often, whether it be at Trump rallies on the ground with Trump supporters, or in this case, sort of a figure within the movement. It is something that I do. And with that being said, here's my conversation with Laura Loomer. You are a big supporter of Donald Trump, and he's a supporter of yours. I have a clip to play on that.
Hey everybody, we're here at Bedminster. I'm with the greatest president ever, President Donald Trump, who is killing it right now. There's a new poll out, right? You're crushing it. You're up over 50 points. And it's a beautiful day here. Beautiful club. It's my first time here at Bedminster.
Well, it's great to have you, and you've been really very special. You work hard, and you are a very opinionated lady. I have to tell you that. And in my opinion, I like that.
Well, I appreciate that.
all of your support, and you've been terrific. And everybody appreciates your support.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to sit with you today. It's a pleasure. You're the best. I love you.
So just kind of, how would you summarize what motivates your support of Donald Trump?
Well, I care about my country, and I want somebody who is going to represent the people, not the corporate interests and not the political parties of our country. And I like the fact that President Trump is despised by both political parties because it means that he's doing something right. We shouldn't take a loyalty to a Republican Party. We shouldn't take a loyalty to a Democrat Party. We should be loyal to the Constitution and the principles and the values that make our country great. And so for me, I don't see anybody else doing that. I see Donald Trump as the only candidate that truly is a populist candidate on the ballot, and he has my full support. I mean, I'm arguably probably President Trump's loudest and most vocal supporter on social media, on the sites that I haven't been banned from. And I feel very strongly that he really is the only candidate that can help get our country out of this mess that we're in today. And it's not about whether you are, a Republican or a Democrat. Those terms are used to divide us, right? You either care about upholding the Constitution, you either care about law and order, you either care about keeping your way of life as an American, right? And upholding and enforcing American values, or you believe in lawlessness and the complete shredding of our United States Constitution, which is what Joe Biden represents. And so,
Donald Trump, you agree, though, he did post on Truth Social that he was supportive of terminating the Constitution?
No, Donald Trump is a constitutional conservative. I think that what Donald Trump was saying is that, we clearly have a crisis in this country where the current occupant of the White House is disrespecting the Constitution. And so I think that there's a lot of satire in a lot of what President Trump posts. But no, I wouldn't say that President Trump has ever said, let's just forget about the Constitution.
Can I read the message to you?
You can read it. Go ahead.
So with the revelation of massive and widespread fraud and deception, and working closely with big tech companies, the DNC and the Democrat Party, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner? Or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this type of magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution.
Well, I think that President Trump, as I just said, is trying to highlight the fact that we have a constitutional crisis in our country.
So terminate it? Come on.
No, I think that he's trying to show the absurdity of the fact that our constitutional rights and our liberties are not being upheld. They're being completely bastardized and defiled by widespread election fraud.
When people say that MAGA is a cult because they just support everything Trump says no matter what, it's moments like this where it's right there on the page or on the screen. Terminate all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. And then that's actually him saying, let's strengthen the Constitution.
No, because he's talking about the fact that we have this evidence, right? That laws have been violated and people's rights have been violated, and nothing's been done about it. Our Constitution has already been shredded, and so I think that President Trump uses a lot of provocation when he speaks to make people realize these points. We don't really have a constitution that's being enforced in this country today. And then people want to say, oh, Donald Trump is talking about throwing out and shredding the Constitution. Well, isn't that exactly what Joe Biden has done? Isn't that exactly what happens when people are jailed for their political speech? We have political prisoners sitting in a jail cell right now because they decided to petition their government for, grievances on January 6th. I mean, you have video footage that shows police officers allowed these people inside the United States Capitol where they were peaceful inside the United States Capitol. And yet for some reason, right, they want us to think that we still live in a free country.
So the ones getting actual notable sentences, it's because they were committing crimes. Now, were there probably some minor trespassing things that aren't going to lead to much? Sure. But the conflation of those who followed in after the mob and kind of walked around the hallways, that's still against the law if they were trespassing.
Do you think that those people should be serving 20 years in prison?
Right, so that's the conflation. No one got 20 years for being peaceful.
Yes, they did. I currently work with a group called NCLU that's representing dozens of January 6ers, and there are people that are being sentenced to over 20 years in prison.
Yes, like Enrique Tarrio.
Walking inside it. You have Enrique Tarrio wasn't even in Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
And he put together a plan for his organization to overthrow the American government.
No, he didn't. I attended the trial. He was not even at... How do you overthrow the government if you're not even in Washington, D.C. or inside the Capitol on January 6th?
Leaders of drug organizations who never deliver a single thing of drugs, are they actually doing their crimes?
What did Enrique Tarrio do? What did he do?
They found the memo where he planned to overthrow the government and led his Proud Boys organization to do so.
He didn't lead anybody. He wasn't even in Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
I feel like I just addressed that point.
He wasn't in Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
So I go back to, if you're the leader of a drug organization, an illegal drug organization, have you not committed any crimes because you did everything over the phone?
Our justice system finds people innocent or guilty based off of their own actions, whether they themselves participated in something. He was not in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. He did not step foot inside the Capitol.
Laura.
No, this is crazy to say that he tried to overthrow the government with what? You would have to use weapons to overthrow the United States government. This is ridiculous.
His minions did at his direction. So if I hired...
Did what at his direction? Did what?
Attempted to overthrow the American government. They tried to and failed.
Overthrow the United States government?
So great. They're incompetent. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be charged with attempting to do something bad.
No, but it's ridiculous.
I need to press you on this principle. You said it multiple times. I need to press you on this. Are you saying that it would not be illegal for me to hire or direct someone to kill someone else?
That would be illegal, but Enrique Tarrio didn't pay anybody to do anything.
I wasn't even in New York City when Elmo got killed.
Yeah, but you're talking about somebody being killed. Enrique Tarrio and the Proud Boys didn't kill anybody.
Listen, I'm not gonna compare crimes, but I think it's pretty dang.
But you just used it as an example, though.
I'm trying to give you. It's a hypothetical to assist.
It's not a hypothetical,
your understanding about how this works. So
walking inside the United States Capitol is not the same as committing murder or being an accessory to murder.
It was domestic terrorism. So let's think of different domestic terrorists.
Our founding fathers domestic terrorism, since our country was born in an act of revolution?
Do you think that the leader of a terrorist organization, who never actually does any of the terrorist acts, but leads the terrorist acts, even if no one dies, and directs his organization to do something that is terrorism, would you say that he hasn't done anything wrong?
That's violent acts of terrorism in which people are dying. There's a difference between what Joe Biden... I don't believe that walking inside the United States Capitol is domestic terrorism.
Okay, we'll put videos up on screen of them walking in the Capitol.
I think that Merrick Garland is a domestic terrorist. Okay, that's what I think. I don't appreciate... People would call me a terrorist simply because of my beliefs, because I've called myself ultra MAGA because I support President Trump. I've never committed a violent crime. But there's people that would say that I'm a domestic terrorist. No, that's what Merrick Garland has said. Merrick Garland has said that
might say that you support domestic terrorism if you're
I don't support domestic terrorism. I support American patriots. I think that the January 6th political prisoners are patriots. I think that we should honor them and recognize them.
But what were you going to say about Merrick Garland?
I think that Merrick Garland is a domestic terrorist, and the way that he's trying to terrorize people and he's trying to hunt down parents at school board meetings for simply addressing issues of their own children's public safety,
But
for
you know
going
that
after
you know
conservative Americans.
you know that's not actually what that was, though, right?
That is what he did, though.
No, during that
He had
same
a memo.
during
He
the
had a
same yes, the
in
memo
which
was
he said that these
yes.
parents were domestic terrorists
The
and that they
ones who
needed
were
to monitor.
no, not just
the
those
ones who
were
did what?
not the ones who were just going and sharing their views, but the concern with school board members during this heated time, because I think it was kind of the COVID like intense time where school board members, elected officials were getting death threats from individuals who were unhappy about their governance. That's the concern of law enforcement for sure, but not just individuals sharing their views at school board meetings.
They think that people who go to school boards are domestic terrorists. They think that white, conservative, Christian Americans are the biggest terrorism threat in this country. That's what Merrick Garland said. So apparently all these cartels coming across our border right now, bringing fentanyl and killing people, and all these, Chinese individuals that are assisting the cartels in manufacturing and shipping fentanyl to America that's killing thousands of people every single year in our country. Those people aren't terrorists, but white Christian conservative Americans are. It's just you can see why people are so upset and so divided in our country.
I will eat my microphone on a live stream if you can find a single quote or a single bit of evidence that shows Merrick Garland saying that white Christian Americans are domestic terrorists.
He said that the biggest terrorism threat in our country is white domestic terrorism. We don't have a white supremacy crisis in this country.
Do you know what percentage of domestic terrorist attacks or domestic terrorist, I should say, politically motivated murders, what percentage of those were white supremacists?
How many?
55%.
Okay, and compare that with the overall murder rate in our country. How many murders that took place were actually politically motivated murders? Okay,
you're
compared
right.
to
politically
how many
motivated
murders
are
take
a lot
place
less.
with
Politically
black
motivated,
on black crime.
Politically
How much murder
motivated.
Takes place?
That's just separate from what we're talking about. Politically
but
motivated.
It's not though. That you see that the way they use these terms to try to say things that are not true. They say that the biggest terrorism threat in our country is white supremacy.
They say
it's not. When
so.
You look
The
at
definition
the amount of deaths,
the definition of domestic terrorism is a very particular definition based on politically motivated actions, attacks, murders. And so, when looking at stats on that, he's just stating a fact that politically motivated attacks are disproportionately white supremacists.
But it's not true, though.
It's divisive for you to freak out about that.
When Christopher Wray was testifying in front of Congress, he was even pressed on whether or not these statistics included attacks by members of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and he said no. He said no because
probably because they're talking about murders, because you don't have like any murders that are.
You do have murders, though. There was a murder in Colorado. I forget the guy's name, but there was an Antifa terrorist that walked up and basically assassinated somebody. You could look it up.
And every single person on the left would want that person to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which absolutely happens.
Really?
It's just
I don't know about that. I see people on the left cheering and hoping for President Trump to be assassinated.
Well,
I don't really see widespread condemnation of political violence on the left. I didn't see any of these Democrats condemn the Black Lives Matter riots. I saw leading Democrats
every single okay. That's just again so bizarre and off topic, but every single person who gets asked about any violence that took place during that time against it. I mean, except for some kooky on the internet, but like the vast majority of definitely elected Democrats and even just pundits and stuff would recognize, hey, mostly peaceful protests, but anything that was violent or any crimes that were committed completely against the essence of the movement.
I didn't see any Democrats condemn all the riots in Minneapolis. I didn't see any of them. I didn't see any of them condemn the fact that Democrat activists who were tied to the Obama administration threw Molotov cocktails into police cruisers in New York City. I didn't see any of that. I don't see it. Maybe we're living on alternate planets, but I just don't ever see Democrats condemn these people.
Yeah, so definitely any violence definitely gets condemned, but
well, I'm glad you're condemning it, but you're not a leading Democrat in Congress, right? You're not Nancy Pelosi, who was taking a knee for a drug addict, right? Who ended up dying from a fentanyl overdose while he was being apprehended by police and then was, wrongfully classified as some kind of... Are you referring to George Floyd right now? Yeah, I'm referring to George Floyd.
So this is exactly why engaging in these conversations can be upsetting, because you act like people aren't condemning violence. But then you say
I didn't see any
an example of Pelosi handling protests against the murder of people
He died from a fentanyl
incorrectly.
overdose. He wasn't murdered.
Oh, so that's what was found? No, it wasn't. Obviously not.
He wasn't murdered. He had fentanyl in his system.
But I thought you believed in the rule of law, and through our lawful process, he was found to have murdered George Floyd.
The process of having the knee put on his neck was an approved tactic by the Minneapolis Police Department. He was
and
following,
the extent to which he did it,
following
as was
police
found in a
protocol.
court of law, was murder.
Is it really a court of law when you have mobs of Black people waiting outside the courthouse threatening to burn the entire city down unless Derek Chauvin is found guilty? I mean, is it really? Or is he more of a sacrificial lamb so that cities don't get burned? Right. That's what I'm talking about. We have a two-tier justice system in this country where it's
rather unhinged.
Rule.
I think
it's mob rule.
All of the analysis by experts on law enforcement tactics and on the judicial system who have weighed in on the George Floyd case can bolster my point on this, as well as everyone's eyes who watched the 9 minutes. But I do think that reflects a little bit why you would be called an extremist, Laura.
Well, people can call me what they want, right? At the end of the day, we have a right to free speech in this country. I'm not advocating for violence against anybody, and you're entitled to your views. I'm entitled to my views. But unfortunately, right, the people in power in our country only want certain people to have their voices heard. And I think that they need to take responsibility for the division that they've caused. You need more freedom of expression so that people watching this dialogue can decide for themselves what's extreme, and who knows, maybe people watching actually agree with me. Your audience tends to be more left-leaning, so maybe they won't agree with me. But there's a lot of people that agree with me who wouldn't agree with you. Some people would call you an extremist. And so do we want to live in a country where we're disenfranchised and we're labeled as extremists or not extremists based off of who's in charge and what their political viewpoints are? I don't think so. I'm a proponent of free speech. I'm a free speech absolutist, which is why I agreed to do your show, even though you're a progressive leftist and I'm not. But I personally think that we have a crisis in this country and people are, experiencing heightened levels of division never before seen in our country because of this explosive rhetoric, calling everybody extremists.
I
and
agree. Well,
people.
extremists, I think you're attaching extremism to some sort of governmental censorship. And I'm just saying the definition of extreme I would apply to your views, but that's separate from me thinking you should be shut down by the government.
But there's millions of Americans that share my views, though.
Individuals who will often, I think very few people share your view on George Floyd, but I think often people who posture to care about addressing division when talking about freedom of speech or something, which obviously I'm a huge supporter of freedom of speech. I just don't think Twitter, banning you is necessarily a violation of that because it has nothing to do with the government. But often those same individuals don't do a little introspection and think about how the guy you support or your views or what you just said about George Floyd could be divisive, could push people who otherwise would want to listen to views on the other side to be like, that's crazy town. And Trump is, I hope you can admit, a very divisive individual with the rhetoric he spews about all sorts of different groups. Or the rhetoric coming from your side about... I hope that you could
agree that Joe Biden is a divisive person.
I think in a divisive time, he says some divisive things that are justified.
Well, I think that President Trump says divisive things that are justified in a divisive time as well. So
right, but you were the one talking about sort of number one goal needs to be, I don't know if number one goal, but a big goal should be addressing the division. I think a bigger goal should be protecting our democracy, which we disagree on what that means, but while also hearing each other out and stuff.
Well, I think that we have different opinions on what the biggest threats to our democracy are, and we have different opinions on how to address that and how to protect it. But at the end of the day, I think that we both agree that we need to have some change in our country. I think that we both recognize that these are unprecedented times. It's just we come to the same conclusion through polar opposites on the political spectrum, and that's okay.
Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show and get a bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and there's a link in the description.